Hey guys, welcome back to my YouTube channel. Today we're going to be starting a new series. It's going to be about computers. And this video is going to be about all the components that you need to build a computer, what they are, and how do they all work together. So let's get right into it. Okay, in this image right here, we can see we have the actual computer over here, and we also have a bunch of other peripherals, for example, the monitor, the mouse, the keyboard, etc. Today, we're going to focus on the computer, which is over here in the case, and what components are actually in the computer and what makes up the computer. So in this image here, let's take a look at the right-hand side. You can see that we have a bunch of different components like the CPU fan, the main board, which is now called the motherboard. But what components do you actually need to build a computer? Well, there's actually 8 main components that you need, and those are the motherboard, CPU, case, SSD or HDD, RAM, power supply, and finally some sort of cooling system. Now what I'm going to do is go into depth of what each of these 8 components actually are. Alright, so first up we have the motherboard. The motherboard is the backbone of the computer. It's a circuit board with all the slots which most of the components fit into. The motherboard itself has no processing power, and it relies on the CPU and the GPU to perform the tasks and give life to the actual computer. It pretty much lets the components communicate with one another. Next up, we have the CPU, which stands for Central Processing Unit, and it is commonly referred to as the processor. It is probably the most important component of your computer. In short, the CPU does things. It doesn't store much data, however, it performs actions that need data very efficiently. The CPU does quick and massive calculations in just billions of seconds. The CPU is most commonly referred to as the brains of the computer, as it's in the center of all the other components. You can see that on the left we have the image of the front of the CPU, and on the right is the image of the back of the CPU. And on the back it has a bunch of pins. This is because if we take a look at our motherboard, the CPU is going to go right here, with the pins facing towards the motherboard. The pins are what allow the CPU and motherboard to connect and work together. Next up, we have the case. Essentially, it's just a big plastic box that stores all of your components. It's the most self-explanatory component on the list. It's one of the components where people try to get the most flashiest, coolest looking case so they can show off their PC. You can see on the screen we have 3 images going, and from left to right it gets more and more expensive. The more LEDs, the more fans, basically the more glamorous you want your PC to look, the more expensive it's going to cost. The next component is the GPU, which stands for Graphics Processing Unit, and it is most commonly referred to as the graphics card. So when a computer is processing all its information from its CPU and other components, the hardest step is actually displaying all the ones and zeros onto your display or your monitor. So graphics card are basically their own computer. It has its own CPU, motherboard, storage, memory, and many other things. It displays all the information on the screen, which is a lot more difficult than you may think. It has to do it at the right time, correct color, and many other different jobs it has to do. The next component, which is on the screen, is storage. There are 2 types of storage: hard drives, HDDs, and solid state drives, SSDs. Storage is where you keep your data and files, and both of them can store a lot of data, but it will take a while to extract the information that you need. So let's take a look at the left side. There's 2 images. The bottom one is the inside of what an HDD is. You can see that there is a kind of disk that looks like a CD. This disk is actually where most of the data is stored. However, these spinning disks make it hard to constantly give the computer the information it needs. So it is a little bit slow, however, it can store a lot of storage for very cheap. Now, on the right hand side, you can see this tiny little stick. This is called an SSD. SSDs are a lot faster than hard drives. They have higher transfer speeds. They're also more reliable. They are smaller. They have a smaller form factor or a smaller size when compared to the HDDs. They are a lot more expensive and they do have a little bit less storage, but they are a lot faster. Most people, when trying to build a computer, they get an SSD for storing smaller items. For example, your OS, operating system, and games. They also invest in an HDD where they can store mass files, such as movies and books, things that you won't use as often. Having both an HDD and SSD can get expensive, so if you just want to get one, I would suggest getting an SSD. This next component is also part of the storage family. It is called RAM, which stands for Random Access Memory, and it's most commonly referred to as just memory. It's another form of storage, but pretty small. However, it's for instant access. So how do we differentiate between storage like SSDs and HDDs between RAM sticks? Well, think of a shed, just a small shed, and then think of a big storage unit. Imagine the CPU wanted to extract some information. Let's say it first went to the big storage unit, or the SSD or HDD. It would have to go through a bunch of different aisles to specifically find the piece of information that it needs. If you think about it, that'll actually take a really long time to find the specific data that it needs. So, this is where the RAM stick comes into play. Like I said, the RAM sticks are acting as a shed for this purpose. So, what is a faster way to do this for the CPU to extract the information it needs? Well, all it has to do is push the specific data it needs from the big storage unit into the shed. So now, when the CPU comes to get its information that it needs, it doesn't have to go through the entire storage unit. It can just go through this small portion of data or just the RAM sticks. One of the last components to plug in is the power supply or just the PSU. This part of the computer is typically located on the bottom of the PC, so most people won't be able to actually see it. The power supply plugs into the outlet, so as you can imagine, it provides and regulates the power given to all the other components. It acts like an air conditioning system for the desktop computer. Finally, we have the cooling system. On the screen, you can see that there are three pictures. These are the three types of cooling systems that you can choose: air, liquid, and custom loop systems. Each of these cool the PC in some way. This one uses air, this one uses water, and this one also uses water. However, as we move from left to right, it gets more expensive. In this image over here, you can't clearly see what the cooling system looks like, but basically what it is these pipes go to the CPU, and these pipes go to the GPU, and this system over here has all the liquid it needs to cool your components. To sum up everything I just went over, let me give you a pretty cool analogy that you can use to remember this. So, the case is your skeleton, the motherboard is your heart, the CPU is your brain, the hard drive slash SSD is your long-term memory, RAM is your short-term memory, PSU is your stomach, GPU is your eyes, and the cooling is your sweat. Alright everybody, that's going to be it for today's video. I'll see you in the coming videos where I'll be going through every single component in more and more depth. That's it for today, and I'll see you in the next ones. Thank you for watching.